Previously on Investors in the Wild.
What are the most common traps when it comes to property investment legally?
There's hundreds of different things that people need to be aware of when they're doing property investments. It does happen where you've got large amounts of damage because something was missed and they're building a pest. In this scenario, the flooring was old and sagging in certain places. It didn't get picked up, and we're talking at least $100,000 to $200,000 of repairs.
We were trying to purchase a place. The seller said, there's a stereo in the house, that you can have that. The contract comes through, there's no mention of the stereo there. And I call the agent, hey, you said the stereo is going to be included. And the agent's like, hey, I'm on a boat party, so now it's just not a really easy time for me to amend the contract. So do you just want to sign the contract as it is?
One that we saw recently was whether or not a room was included.
Hello, welcome back. If you missed part 1 with Hayder, go and grab that first. We covered conveyancing curveballs, the wildest contract inclusions you've ever heard, and why being the pest might be your best property strategy. Now, in this next episode, we're going somewhere a bit different. Hayder walks us through binding financial agreements, also known as prenups, and it honestly changed how I think about them. Let's get into it. Hayder, welcome to the podcast. Do you want to tell us about yourself and your firm?
Thanks for having me on the show. I grew up in the western suburbs of Sydney. My mum's Japanese and my father's from Iraq. Classic kids of migrant story. All of us had to work really hard. I forged my own path through sport. I started off with Taekwondo, which was competing internationally, and then going to the Olympics in 2016. And then opening up my law practice after the Olympics. We're a national brand. It's the Justice Network, and we support thousands of Australians every year. It could be purchasing their first property. It could be helping them through their divorce. It could be suing their builders because they've done a bad job on their building site.
We'd love to talk a bit more about when you're merging property and partners, even if a marriage isn't involved. We'd love to talk about at what point do you need to worry about protecting your assets when you're in a relationship?
I would say the lawyer in me is, it's something that you should always be thinking about. And I don't say that lightly. I think when it comes to relationships, the first thing, really one of the first points of importance, disputes, annoyances comes around finances, doesn't it? It's like the basic, Let's take it right back, and it's who's going to pay for the bill. That's
Man, obviously.
Yeah. So the expectations around
I'm just joking.
The expectations around that, is it equality? Is it the man should provide? Is it that, no, I'm a boss woman and I'm going to provide? So it's that dynamic from the start. And finances is something that you cannot have a proper relationship without interweaving the financial discussions around it. Okay. The spending habits, purchasing, who's going to pay for this, who's going to pay for that, who's making this money, who's making that money, what assets are we going to buy, all of that kind of stuff. It is completely interconnected. And
even holiday Hayder, even holidaying, when you're one thing that I've struggled with in this relationship is my boyfriend makes a lot more money than what I do. So his cash flow is more comfortable. So he can holiday much more lavishly. I've got to be much more deliberate about cash flow. And so even in a relationship, talking about if you want to stay in a place that's expensive, that's fine. But should we be going 50-50? Because I don't need to stay in something this lavish. So there really are you really do become intertwined very quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. And everything goes around like financial decisions. I think we try and veer away from that concept because in the last 50 years, we've been influenced to think that relationships are about love and having a good time and romance. And it's like, we've got that concept. But if you think about it, prior to the last 40, 50 years, relationships were about stability. They were about building a family. They were about creating a work unit, really relying on one another for different things. And so that's always been the concept of why you need in a relationship, right? To have that. Obviously, there's the romantic element, but that's been exacerbated a lot more, I think, recently with Western culture and Hollywood and the idea of the concepts of these romances. Ultimately, relationships are about how you can rely on one another, how you can build a life together, how you can progress through life together, how you can support one another. And you can't have those discussions without talking about finances. And when you talk about finances, then you talk about, in that example, who's going to purchase what, who's going to spend this, spending habits, all of that's great. But then an important concept is what's going to happen in the event that we separate or this relationship breaks down? What's going to happen to everything that we've accumulated? What's going to happen to the stuff that I brought into the relationship? What's going to happen to the stuff that potentially I'm going to receive during the relationship or even after the relationship? What should happen to all of that stuff in the event we separate? And you can call me a negative Nancy, but for me, I always explain it as nobody wants their houses to burn down, but everybody here buys home insurance, right? You don't buy home insurance because you're thinking about your house burning down. You're not buying it because you want it to happen, but you've got that insurance policy in place just in case. Okay, just in case. Now, what are the odds of your house burning down? I can't give you that off the top of my head, but I would imagine it's less than 1 in 100. Okay, I really don't think. Like, how many people do you have that have had their house burned down? Not a lot. How many people do you know that have had a separation or a breakup?
A lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. So we're talking. There's a lot of people that go through separations. Okay, statistically, you're talking a high rate of divorce in Australia. I think it's about 30%. Top of that, you got de facto relationships, which is when people are in relationships, longer term, let's say relationships without being married. And you've got separations that occur in that category as well, which aren't really noted statistically because it's hard to measure because they're not registered anywhere. But separations happen all the time, of course. Everybody here's probably been through a separation, I would say. And so, yeah,
Multiple.
yeah, exactly. For relationships of different lengths. So the reality is separations do happen, and the longer that you're together, the more intertwined you become, and your finances become intertwined. And so you need to figure out what's going to happen when you separate. And you've got two options, really. One is you figure it out beforehand, and the second is you figure it out after. You can figure it out after, and a lot of people do. A lot of people are able to negotiate what happens to their finances. They're able to come to an agreement as to what occurs, or alternatively, they get lawyers involved and they try and solve it with their lawyers. So that's a very common approach. And I guess for some people, they prefer to have these discussions prior to separation, and that would lead to something like a binding financial agreement or a prenup being put in place, which is essentially a tool to determine how your assets will be split in the event that you do separate. It's a tool that we see increasingly common. People are opting into that insurance policy, I'll call it, because they're concerned as to what's going to happen. My personal opinion is everyone would do it if they understood what it was, if they understood what would happen if they don't have it, and if they could afford it. So all of those three things, if those three things were all understood by everyone and there was an accessibility in terms of affording the prenups or BFAs, I think everyone would actually do it. There's no reason not to. But because there's a bit
You
of
mean
an
everyone, sorry to interrupt you, but do you mean everyone who's in a financially beneficial position in that relationship, or whether you're in a financially beneficial position or not, both parties would want it?
I would say both parties would want it if they understood what it was.
That's
And
really important because
Yeah.
and again, because I would have no clue about that. And the fact that you said that you could compare it to house insurance, it's actually such a good example because you're right. Like we have far less chance of floods or fires destroying our homes. We've got a much higher chance of a relationship breakdown, yet it's just BAU that we would get home insurance and it costs an arm and a leg every year, like for this house, it's hugely expensive. And then on top of that, but if someone was to say, oh, like we need insurance to protect in the worst case scenario of something that's highly possible of a relationship breakdown, it's like, oh, ew, no, what are you even talking about? So
It's so unromantic. It's so unromantic. I would be.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just unsexy and it's you. But what is it about these agreements that everyone would want if they knew that? What is it that people don't know that they should know that makes it more of a appealing thing to do?
It gives you certainty. It gives you finality as to what's going to happen. And it gives you the power to make decisions for yourself, as opposed to leaving it to the legal system, where there's a lot of things in the legal system that people wouldn't agree with. It doesn't really it might not align with what they would want to happen. So it's actually very empowering to be able to make your own decisions with your partner as to what you consider to be fair and what you consider to be a just and equitable outcome. You can have those decisions between you and your partner, as opposed to leaving it up to lawyers or a judge or principles in family law in Australia, which I can without a doubt say that very few people have a good understanding around. And if I were to tell you some things that would happen in the context of a family law situation, if it went to court, if I told you maybe 2 or 3 different things, I'm sure one of them would resonate with you in a very negative way, in the sense that you'd say, no, that doesn't really sound fair to me, or that doesn't really align with how I would think it should go. And that changes for everyone. But those, by putting a BFA in place, then you're avoiding those potential outcomes that you wouldn't be happy with.
Just to play devil's advocate on what you just said about it being beneficial, what would be say there's one person who's financially better off than the other person, and this is purely a curiosity question, right? But so in a case where you're together in a de facto or in a marriage or whatever the case may be for like many years, and someone is significantly better off financially than the other person, wouldn't that person who's worse off just think, I would be better off not having the agreement no matter what the courts say? Because obviously, no matter what the family courts say in the long run, I will be better off by not having an agreement. Like that would be the intuitive feeling that someone so then how do you, what's in it for them, really?
Yeah, it's a good point. I think a good binding financial agreement will cater for those situations, because at the end of the day, both people need to sign. Okay, both people need to agree to it. So you're right. In that situation, if somebody's a financially weaker party and they're going into an agreement, they're thinking, why would I want to sign this agreement if it means that if I'm hypothetically with this person for 10 years and at the end of it, I walk out with $100,000 and then they walk out with $2 million, why would I do that? I'll just go through the family law system, and that way I'll be able to claim more money. That's a very good point. What I'd say is a good financial agreement means that both parties are happy with this situation. Okay. You can't have a financial agreement unless both parties are happy to sign the document. Okay. So that's important.
But so then it comes into, from my personal perspective, I think it comes into different realms, right? I think both parties have to sign it, but theoretically they might not be happy about signing it, or they might be so offended by it that they won't sign it and then the relationship breaks down. So I think where there would be a case,
which might not be a bad situation, just FYI, Dario.
Oh yeah, because then you're going into it for the wrong motives, right?
That's right.
But I do think that it's different depending on your financial disparities. So I think in the case that you say both are better off, it's probably more where financially you're close, like you basically are relatively equal, and that's the disparity isn't too big for it to be beneficial for both parties, because then it's very fair. Like you've got assets, they've got assets, and you're merging together. But in a situation where someone is a lot better off financially than the other person, no matter what the agreement is, I do think that it does leave. Yeah, I think you're right, though. It weeds out who's not in it for the right motivations, but there will be one party who will come out worse off than if they didn't have an agreement, I think.
Oh, sorry. I think I need to clarify the point, and that is the terms of a financial agreement are up for negotiation.
Right.
So as an example, if somebody has $1 to their name and they end up with a person that's got $1 million to their name,
right,
and they just start dating today, and they start dating for a few weeks, and they're like, oh, okay, let's see what's going to happen here. And then obviously the person with $1 million is going to be like, hold on, I need to think about my asset protection here because I've got $1 million, she's got $1 or he's got $1. It's not really going to be fair here. So then they start talking about the binding financial agreement, and then they go, okay, what do you think about this? Maybe the person with $1 is, oh, it doesn't sound very romantic. I'm not really happy with this. I don't think I'm going to do it. And then the discussion would start moving towards, hold on, like, I don't want to completely shaft you. I'm not trying to leave you with $1. If we're together for 10 years, then I also want you to receive some benefits from being in this relationship. And maybe we can do a whole bunch of things together that's going to grow our wealth. It doesn't mean that you're going to leave with $1. Okay. It's about how we structure it. And so I've seen all sorts of structures in terms of what people think considered to be fair. As an example, it could be a tiered system where it's, okay, we're together for 5 years. You're going to get this much. You're together for 10 years, it's going to be this much. We've had a child together, that might increase by this much. We've had 2 kids together, it might increase by this much. Okay, what about assets that you bring into what about things that you bring into the relationship? It might be shaded by a certain percentage over time. So there's so many things that can be done. It doesn't need to be thought of in this black and white. You came in with this, you're going to lead with that. I think you've also got to think, for a normal relationship, I think it's normally about, on average, about 7 years actually. And so for a marriage or a de facto relationship, it's about 7 years. So during that time, it's like, have you accumulated assets? What assets have you accumulated? Did you have the assets in your name? Did they purchase in joint names? What's going to happen to assets that are purchased in joint names? What's going to happen to assets that were purchased just solely in your name? Maybe you receive an inheritance. That's a whole huge conversation that we could do a whole new podcast on, which is like how inheritances are treated when it comes to family law and separations or disputes over inheritances. But that's a huge topic you've got to think about. We've got the largest transfer of wealth that's occurring in Australia at the moment, where I think it's like $4 trillion worth of assets are going to be passed over in the next 20 years. And that's going to be because of inheritances. A financial agreement can explain what's going to happen to an inheritance. And we've had situations, as an example, where a father has been planning his will, and he's quite elderly, maybe in his 80s or so. And as a result of him planning his will, he's obviously going to leave some wealth to his kids. Okay. And he's got 2 kids. And as a result of his estate planning, he's told his kids, look, I'm going to leave you X amount of dollars in a will, but I'm only going to do that if you put a binding financial agreement in place with your current partner, protecting that inheritance. Because if something goes wrong, I don't want that. That's the money that I've worked hard for. I want it to go to you, my child, and I want it to go to my grandkids. But if something were to happen between you and your current partner, I want to make sure that current partner doesn't receive a portion of this inheritance. So to protect that, you need to put a BFA in place. Again, another example as to how it can be useful to give clarity and help make these people make these financial decisions.
Really good.
Yeah. So I don't want people to kind of think of a binding financial agreement as one person's weaker and one person's stronger, or like there's no incentive for the financially weaker party to do it. I would say everything is up for discussion. You can be as creative as you want. You can come up with the terms that you think is fair. And the true benefit of it is giving you certainty and finality. And back to my original point, if it was something that was more well-known and people were forced to do it, then it would be, I think, a lot more beneficial for everyone.
Yeah, for sure. And at the end of the day, you hear that the lawyer benefits, like in a breakup where there isn't a financial agreement, the only one who really benefits is the lawyer from a financial perspective, because a lot of fees go into the family court system and all that. So that could be another case, right? Because instead of the lawyers, no offense, getting the money, it's like, well, we could keep the money between us, at least in that regard.
Yeah, like you're talking a normal legal dispute for a divorce, it's anywhere between $20,000 to $200,000, like on average.
So I've got a friend who paid $200,000 and it was over many, many years. I told
Yeah.
you about this one, Beck, where the husband basically took all the money out of the account prior to the divorce, and then it just became very, very ugly. And yeah, I think that it ended up costing her around $2 million.
Yeah, legal fees can stack up very quickly. So that it's really your insurance policy against paying those large legal fees on the way out. So
Yeah.
giving you that certainty. And I genuinely think having that discussion early on in your relationship is so powerful, and it will clear up a lot of things in terms of how you view your relationship, how you view your partner, what you've got, how you're going to manage your finances. These are really hard and uncomfortable conversations for people to have, and people won't have it. People will be in relationships for years and not touch on and not have an understanding as to their partner's financial position, what they're earning, what assets they own, all of that kind of stuff. So people try and avoid these conversations when it comes to money and financial positions. But by having a discussion around a financial agreement early on, you're dealing with an very uncomfortable conversation, but you're getting it out of the way, and it will give you so much more clarity in terms of your relationship, in terms of the person that you're with, whether you want to still be with this person. Why not figure it out 1 month, 2 months, 3 months into a relationship? Why not figure out, should I be with this person because I don't really like their attitude with their money, or I do like their attitude with the money? It sounds fair. Don't you want to know these things right at the outset when you start dating this person, as opposed to finding it out after 1 or 2 years that you've fallen in love, you've moved in together, you're now invested and emotional about it. You don't want to leave this person. Wouldn't you rather want to know from the outset, like before you go down that path?
I think that's the problem. A lot of people don't want to know. They just don't want to deal with it. Like, I don't want to know. I just and they hope for the best, and they think, let's just be optimistic. Why should we turn our mind, to your point earlier? Like, I don't want to jinx it. I don't want to put negative energy on this relationship. I don't want to act like this relationship might end and put a dark cloud over it. But to your point, this is like, we do a lot more for a lot less possibility with house insurance, and this is just so much more critical. It's just, we need like tips and tricks on how to have this conversation effectively, because it is very awkward to think about. It's never been an issue for me, like I've not had to, but it's something that maybe we all should be cognizant of. And so maybe we need to do a whole episode on how to have an awkward conversation.
Yeah.
And then how to take care of yourself if you have not had this conversation and you're in that relationship already.
Yeah.
Like, then what do you do?
Yeah.
You can still do it, right? Post-nup.
Yeah. You can do a financial agreement at any point.
Yeah.
I think the thing that's blown my mind in this conversation, just before we wrap, is, Hayder, you've used words like empowering, powerful, clarity. The way that you're talking about this, BFAs sound really positive, and I've only ever looked at them negatively. And so this conversation has made me go, actually, maybe this could be a really positive conversation. And maybe it could be a really nice way for my partner and I to talk through like our values and why different things mean and how this would actually work. And we can learn more about each other through this process. So I like the idea of viewing this as a positive and fair conversation rather than something that's super unromantic and talking about the worst case scenario. It can be positive.
Yeah. That's right. It doesn't need to be adversarial. It doesn't need to be like me versus you. It can be a huge discovery kind of learning curve about your partner, see what their values are, what they think about certain situations. And I go back to inheritances. That's a big one, because that's something that people never think about really when they're in a relationship. But I'd encourage you here, and also to listeners as well, have to think about, if you're in a relationship, or if you're going to be in a relationship, just ask this question: how would you deal with an inheritance that comes your way? Or how would you deal with an inheritance that goes to your partner from their family? Would that be something that you'd be comfortable in splitting between the two of you, if in the event you do separate? Or do you think it's something that should remain with the person that it was left to? Obviously, it changes based on a whole range of different scenarios and factors, and I won't go so deep into it. But if you ask the room of 100 people what should happen to an inheritance in your situation, then I'm sure you'd get different answers. Okay. Some people might say, yes, it should go to the both of us because we've been together for so long, or I've got a great relationship with my mother-in-law, or I've got a great relationship with my father-in-law and I care for them. I go to their house every week. Or someone will be like, no, I've got nothing to do with that. That's not my money. It should be staying in this side. Or so I guarantee if you went to, it's a divisive topic, and I know that because I talk about this stuff all the time. But if you went to a room with 100 people, I'm sure you get a lot of different opinions and different ways of how that money should be split. Why? Because everyone has different family dynamics. Everyone has a different family situation. Everyone views their in-laws in a different way versus their family. Like, people have different situations that have going on, right? And so that's fair enough. Like, I understand that, but know that if you don't have a financial agreement, then that power of allocation might be stripped away from you, because in that situation, you're just then following the Australian family law system, but it might not line up with what you think or what your values are. That's just the one scenario that I will leave out there for people to think about and to understand why it's important to take back your power and make your decisions for yourself, and do so when things haven't hit an emotional point of separation and there's been issues and you're arguing over 10 other different things, and you're arguing over who's going to keep the dishwasher, or no, I'm going to keep the microwave, and who's going to have the kids on Wednesdays, and no, there's so many things to argue about. Don't worry, you're going to have a long list if you do end up separating. And
sorry, I bags the shipping container. I'm taking it.
yeah. So there's so many things to argue about. What I'm saying is just make your life a little bit easier and have the discussions before you get into that emotional state, and use it as a positive way to learn more about your partner and get an understanding as to what they value. And I think you see so many benefits from it. Obviously, Beth, you're in a situation where you're in a relationship for a longer period of time. I think it's still available to you to have those discussions. But yeah, it's open to everyone really to have that discussion as early or during a relationship. It's all possible.
I actually, yes, we've been we've been together for a while, but genuinely, Hayder, this conversation is really it's like someone's just told me, no, the world's not a circle, it's a triangle. And I'm like, no, BFAs can be really positive. Like, I'm almost thinking, actually, this would be a really interesting conversation with my boyfriend. I would be very interested in learning about what he thinks about inheritances, about what he thinks. I've got Canva equity. What does he think about that?
Yeah.
Does he think that should be split? Or does he agree that should be mine? This would be a very interesting conversation.
Maybe before you have it, get him to listen to this episode and then be like, now let's have this conversation.
Yeah, that's right.
The funny thing is, Hayder, he's also a lawyer. So he might have, I don't know, actually, I don't know if he would have thought about this already. Before we wrap, I want to recap on the gold nuggets that I've taken out of this conversation. I feel like we've actually covered a lot of ground here. Number one, binding financial agreements can be positive and fair conversations. You've used the words empowering, powerful, clarity, learning about your partner. So these can be really positive conversations, and you would never say, I don't want to talk about insurance because I don't want my house to burn down. And so we should apply that same logic. You want to think about, you just want to go in prepared and looking after yourself. Yeah. It would be great to have you, Hayder, if you're open to it, it would be great to have, like, exactly what Daria said a moment ago, a conversation on like how to have a BFA conversation, including the inheritance angle and what happens there.
Yeah.
I feel like you're the head of marketing for this BFA. And honestly, like, I would take a few of what you've already said and turn it into a narrative, a script around the home insurance analogy, around the everyone's better off, and then spelling out examples as to, why. And honestly, I think we could come up with a how-to list that's never existed that would be really useful for people, because I think I don't know anyone who has an agreement, honestly. Like, I know so many married people. I know only one who's got an agreement, and they only developed it after they got married. And it was about existing home that one owned, and then renovations that they wanted to embark on that. So I think that there is a lot to be said about how valuable this conversation is for people, how awkward it can be, but how unnecessarily awkward it is. There are taboo topics from back in the day that people would never dream of speaking of, that now it's just a BAU part of conversations. And I feel like in 5 to 10 years, it will be weird for people to not have an agreement in place. So I think we're on the cusp of something really important and really, really interesting. And I think to flesh it out with you, to Beck's point, would be amazing. It would be an amazing tool for people to have, and so many people would want it. And then Hayder, I also want to just highlight that you do have an Instagram, and we will, if you are happy with it, we will share your details for our listeners in case they need a great family lawyer to reach out to you. But so your Instagram handle is Hayder_legal, HAYDER_legal, and you share a lot of really short, sharp, interesting tidbits on your Instagram, which are really bite-sized content that can really help people in their family law, including property decision-making processes. Thank you for your time. I've learned so much, honestly, and I love these episodes when I come out learning a bunch of new stuff.
Thank you, guys. It's been a great chat, and I think listeners got some benefit out of it. And yeah, if they've got any questions, of course, they can reach out to me and my team, follow me on my socials. And yeah, I hope to just really give the best advice I can possible to everyday Australians. There's a huge knowledge gap out there that I find, and I'm just trying to do my small part in terms of filling that knowledge gap in a few different ways, because that knowledge, it will, I hope, lead to better decisions that you can make. And ultimately, it can prevent, I think, problems happening down the future. So yeah, that's my goal in life.
I love it.
Fabulous.
Yeah. Well, you can always update your Instagram bio as well. You've got Olympian, you've got legal business owner, and now you can add head of marketing for BFAs.
You're the
as
head
well.
of marketing.
Yeah, BFAs Australia organisation.
All right. Thank you again for your time,
Thank
Hayder.
you for your
Great.
time.
Thanks, guys. I
Thank
appreciate
you.
it.
Bye.
Catch you later.
Bye.
Bye.
All right, that's a wrap for part 2 with Hayder. I came into this conversation thinking BFAs were unromantic and so awkward, but I'm walking out thinking it's not so bad. Hayder is a great head of marketing for BFAs. If this episode got you thinking, send it to a person who might also want to think about a BFA. And we want to hear from you. Would you ever consider a BFA? Come and find us on Instagram at Investors in the Wild. DMs are always open. And a huge thank you to Hayder for 2 brilliant episodes. You can find him on Instagram, Hayder Legal. That's HAYDER Legal, for short, sharp, useful family law tidbits. You know the drill, not financial advice or legal advice on this episode, and always do your own research. It's super fun. We'll see you next time.